Good morning and welcome to our Discovering Luximo webinar. Thank you very much for joining us live this morning. Hope you've all got yourselves a cup of tea or coffee and are ready to delve into this exciting new mode of action with us. So if there's three things that we would like you to take away from today, it's one, that Luximo is a new mode of action, the first new mode of action for blackgrass control in cereals in over 20 years. Two, its superior performance on blackgrass control, setting a new standard for blackgrass control in winter wheat. And three, it's also exceptionally strong on ryegrass. Okay. Our two speakers for today even are Stu Kievis, who is Business Development Manager for Cereal Herbicides, and Steve Dennis, who is Head of Business Development. Both have worked on Luximo for many, many years and are delighted that we finally have approval for use this autumn in Great Britain. It's definitely, I think, one of their babies, and they are most definitely our two technical gurus on the subject. So don't be shy with those questions. Oops, sorry about that. So on that note, I'd like to introduce you to Stu Kievis, who's going to take over from now. Thank you.
Hi, Jane. Thank you very much, and morning, everybody. I hope you're all fit and raring to learn a little bit more about Luximo. As Jane said, it's really good that we have the approval for Luximo for use to help you guys battle against grass weeds from this autumn onwards. Before we dive into some of the detail and a bit of a deep dive around the benefits of Luximo, thought it'd be best just to start off showing you exactly what it is that we will be selling. So Luximo comes as the product called Luxinem Plus, and it will come in a box alongside Stomp Aqua. So you will get in one box, you will get 1 can of Luxinem Plus and 2 cans of Stomp Aqua. I'm sure the observant among you have already noticed, yes, that Luximo bottle is not full right to the top. There's 3.5 litres of Luxinem in that can. But using that at full dose, 0.7 litres a hectare, along with the 2 cans of Stomp Aqua, will give you then 5 hectares of coverage. We will go on to show this in more detail a little bit later on, but to get the best out of Luximo, you put it on pre-emergence to your winter wheat crops. We are using the status at the moment that if your crops are drilled late after the 15th of November, wait for those crops to come up and then use the Luxinem Plus as an early post-emergence. Just to sort of cover off some sort of other basics in terms of the product profile, as we say, to get the best out of Luxinem Plus, use it pre-em in your winter wheat. It is very good, and we will go on to show this against blackgrass and ryegrass, but also annual meadowgrass and poppy are also on the label for Luxinem Plus. The label will have a water volume of 150 to 300 litres per hectare. You can go down to 100 litres, but the efficacy is at your own risk. And what we also have with Luxinem Plus is we have a non-reducible buffer zone 5 metres from non-cropped land. If you have any more further sort of questions around the basics, obviously you have the Slido available. You can put those in and we will look to answer those later on at the end of the webinar. But to sort of now dive into what we want to sort of cover across on this webinar, so just giving you an overview of the points that we want to cover here. Not going to go through these one by one right now. We will quite evident as we go through them what we are. So where we're going to start is with a very, very key message up front, and that is the value of IPM and that it remains key. I hope you've all got your reading glasses on, but on a serious note, don't worry about trying to read the detail on this screen at the moment. We'll be able to send out a copy of this to everybody who has registered. But what we want to just clarify and enforce the message around IPM is it remains key. Yes, we have a brand new mode of action, which is much needed in the fight against blackgrass and ryegrass. but everything you've been doing up to now in terms of your cultural control, building that base of the pyramid, is still vital and still must be enforced. So Luximo is a powerful new tool that comes in, if you like, at the end of the sequence of events for cultural control, and where we would be right now in terms of understanding your cropping rotation. Are you going to be putting a winter cereal crop into that field? The type of cultivation strategy that you might be using now, establishing that crop, then leading into using the best chemistry at the best place to get the best out of it. But as I said, the detail of this slide we can hand out as a PDF to everybody who has applied. Just really quickly wanted to cover off the rediscovered story of Luximo, because it's important, I think, everybody has a clear understanding. We're very clear that Luximo is a rediscovered molecule, first discovered back in the 1970s. But at that time, a number of factors, including cost of production and availability of raw material, meant that it was not able to take off from a commercial point of view. What we did have, though, is a large batch had been made, and to get rid of that batch, a registration was gained in Asia, and Luximo was used on rice until that batch was used up. And then basically the AI was mothballed, put away on the back of a shelf and forgotten about. And then it's really a very good human story that our experts within BASF knew about Luximo, had come across it earlier on in their careers, and decided to sort of bring it out of the cupboard, rescreen it, and look at it against sort of European conditions and European grass weeds, so blackgrass and ryegrass in particular. And that is where then we found that actually we've got a very powerful molecule, and a much needed one as soil residual chemistry becomes more important going forward with resistance issues to post-emergence chemistry. So Luximo was well timed and well needed to sort of come into the armory for the fight against grass weeds for us. So to dive then into a little bit more detail around the mode of action, I'm now going to hand over to Steve Dennis, who will go into that in a little bit more detail with you. So over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Stu, and I really appreciate everyone coming along to share in the excitement that we have with Luximo. As we've already said, a new mode of action is a very rare thing. It's almost a once in a career happening. So it is exciting to have you here with us this morning to join us on this journey. Now, I want to just make a few points. I won't keep you too long because this is quite detailed, this bit, but I hope you'll find it interesting as we talk a little bit about the mode of reaction of Luximo, just at a very high level, because I want you to see how this is something that is truly new. And that's why we're able to get levels of performance against your blackgrass and against ryegrass that we've not seen for many years. So let's just jump into it. First of all, thinking about the current range of herbicides that are available for our use. Now, again, a little bit like the chart Stu showed earlier, don't hope to read the detail of this. This information is all freely available online. But what I wanted to show you was the current HRAC poster, which shows all the different herbicides that have been used either historically or currently globally. And each one of the hexagons on the screen now is a different herbicide active ingredient. So straight away you can see there are a lot of herbicides out there, and it's almost an overwhelming number of herbicides that are used globally. But what we need to think about is which of those are available for European, UK conditions, which of those meet our stringent regulatory requirements for use currently. And actually, once you start thinking about it in that way, the majority of those herbicides become irrelevant because they just would not be registrable in Great Britain. Beyond that, of course, a lot of those are also not active against grass weeds either. Many of those on there are more targeted against broadleaf weeds, or they're non-selective herbicides, so they wouldn't be available for use for grass weed control in cereals. But having said that, there's still a few herbicides on there which are active. And if you look closely at the poster, what you'll see is that there are 3 separate columns. And those 3 separate columns give a very coarse grouping of 3 different sites of activity of different herbicides. And in general, most of the herbicides that we use for grass weed control in the residual activity come in that middle column, the one that's headed cellular metabolism. There are some others, but the key ones are in that column. So what I'd like to do is just focus in a little bit more in a moment. But if you just look towards the center of that column, you can see a big block. And that is where the majority of the key residual blackgrass herbicides sit. So let me just focus in on that, and hopefully you'll be able to read the names of some familiar active ingredients at that point. So this is the block now on the screen. And you can see what we have now is one big block, which is labeled 15, and another block of 2 herbicides, which is labeled 30. Now, within that big block, we've got herbicides like dimethanamide, we've got metazoclor, which you'll be familiar with. But as we come more into the cereal crop, we've got trialate, we've got ethofumizate, we've got prosulfocarb, we've got flufenicet. All of those herbicides I've just mentioned are now listed as having the same mode of action, which is inhibition of very long chain fatty acid synthesis. Now, just to the right, you can see those 2 other herbicides, and the one highlighted there is symmetholin, and symmetholin is the active ingredient which is powering Luximo technology. And that is in a group there called inhibition of fatty acid thioesterase. Now, we talk about Luximo as being a unique mode of action, and you can see already that there is a second herbicide that's connected with it. But that is a herbicide that is used in Asia, and it's used in for turf grass control. It's not something that's relevant to blackgrass control or for use in Europe. So in terms of herbicide in arable agriculture in general, but specifically in Europe, symmetholin, the active ingredient in Luximo, is completely unique. Now, both of those blocks there, 15 and 30, you may notice have got the expression fatty acid in them. So it may be tempting to think of those as, okay, they might be different, but they're very similar. Actually, that's not the case. They are truly distinct here. Although they both work in terms of the synthesis of fatty acids, that is not saying that there is a connection between the 2. Now, fatty acids are really important to the weed. They're important to all plants as they grow. They're used for cell membrane production, and that's the area where Luximo is particularly active. But the other herbicides there, things like flufenicet, they're actually there to prevent the production of very long chain fatty acids. And they're more concerned with leaf wax, epicuticular wax. So it is quite a different stage in the process that these herbicides work. And that's why we're able to say that Luximo is a new mode of action, and it is truly unique. So how does it work? Well, we've already mentioned fatty acids. We've already mentioned how they're absolutely critical for cell membrane production. And this illustration here gives 1 or 2 points. Clearly, this is a very complex story, and this is just a simplification of it. But if you look in little diagram 1 there on the left, what you can see is the fatty acid chain building. And what happens is more and more carbon atoms are added onto the chain. lengthening that chain. And when the fatty acid chain is the correct length, it is removed from the acyl carrier group there. And you can see that in picture 2. You've got those, what we call fat enzymes. That stands for fatty acid transferase. They come in and they then trim off the fatty acid from the acyl carrier. And all of this is happening in the chloroplast in the cell. But at the point that the fatty acid chain is removed from the acyl carrier, that then that chain leaves the chloroplast and it moves to the endoplasmic reticulum, where it's actually built up into the structures that are required by the cell. Now, these scissors, these fat enzymes, are the point where Luximo is active. And you can see there in picture 4, Luximo is illustrated by the triangle. That actually blocks these scissors. So it blocks at the point where the cutting of the fatty acid chain normally occurs and prevents that removal from the acyl carrier. And there are more than one type of fat enzyme in the cell, but the really good news is Luximo is active against all of those types. So actually it's another reason to believe that actually this should be a robust herbicide in terms of resistance development. And because of that, the cell starts to become starved of these fatty acids. And if they don't have the fatty acids, cell membranes cannot develop. And you can see an illustration in picture 5 where the cell membrane is starting to be disruptive and it just cannot grow. And this is incredibly effective at the seedling stage. Because of the activity against fatty acids, this is very effective herbicide when the black grass, when the ryegrass is very actively growing, and that means when it's small. And the uptake of the herbicide means that the seedlings just never grow, and we get very quick, very rapid early control, even from Luximo that hits the germinating seed on the seed surface, as well as seed that's right down through the soil profile. So it is a new mode of action. It's genuinely distinct from other herbicides that are available. And because it's new, it means we are resetting the clock. Your blackgrass, your ryegrass has never seen a herbicide that works in this way. So that itself raises an interesting point. If your herbicide is never seen, if your weeds have never seen a herbicide of this mode of action, is there any cross-resistant? Is what I've said true? Is this distinction between these Luximo activity in group 30 really different from the mode of action of the herbicides that we've been relying on for the past 20 years or so? Well, I'm really pleased to say that our colleagues at Rothamsted Research have spent quite some considerable time over recent years working with Luximo. They've been investigating how Luximo performs against strains of blackgrass right across the country. In fact, they've selected blackgrass from 100 different locations, and they've screened the performance of Luximo and compared how that works to other herbicides that are available. And the really good news is that data shows that there is no direct cross-resistance between Luximo and other herbicides that you've been using now. I won't spend time looking at all of that data. That's very complex, as you can imagine. But what I would like to show you is just one study that really illustrates the point. And again, this is done by Rothamsted Research down in Hertfordshire. And what they've done here is they've already done the 100 different populations from around the country, but they wanted to run a test that was even more stringent. And what they've done is created artificially in the laboratory by selective breeding an artificial strain of blackgrass that was as resistant to flufenicet as they could achieve. So none of you watching have got blackgrass as difficult to control by flufenicet. as you're seeing on the screen. Let's be clear, this is an artificial strain. So it's the real worst case scenario. And what they've done now is potted up those strains. And you can see there in the picture at the top, they've then used increasing doses of Luximo going from left to right until we get to the field rate, which is illustrated in the pot. And that was done with Luximo, and that was done with flufenicet as well. And straight away, what you can see with this worst case strain of blackgrass artificially generated, when flufenicet was used at field rate, it is only giving 23% control of blackgrass. And actually, when Luximo is applied to that same population, again at field rate, we're getting around 60% control. So really, really tough situation. And you can see how Luximo is holding up in that situation. Just further underlying the fact that there is no direct cross-resistance between Luximo and flufenicet, which is also true for other herbicides that are available as well. So what we've got here, this hopefully you can start to see why we're really excited about this. It's so rare to have a new mode of action for grassweed control. It's such a difficult regulatory environment, and blackgrass is such an active weed in terms of resistance development that this is truly exciting. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Stu again, who will talk a little bit more about the practical aspects of using Luximo.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yes, so Steve has sort of set a little bit of the background scene for you with the mode of action and the cross resistance, and gone into a reasonable level of detail. But we're going to sort of switch gears a little bit now and show you why it's working so well in the field, and why we believe that you need to be using Luxinem Plus as part of your grassweed program going forward. So we're going to build this a little bit up as we go along. So setting a new standard, the first thing that we have to do is understand how good Luximo as a solo active was against current standards. And the current standard in the marketplace, everybody is aware, is flufenicet. That is currently the base of most grassweed programs here in the UK. So the first thing we needed to do was understand how Luximo would fare against flufenicet. So we know we're not selling Luximo as a solo product, but this is the AI to AI comparison. So we have done many trials in the UK looking at blackgrass, looking at this direct comparison of Luximo at its full dose rate, field rate, versus flufenicet at its full field rate as well. And as you can see from the picture there, just one example of many we have where we have this side-by-side comparison. The power of Luximo really is very good compared to flufenicet. So taking all the data together and what that sort of shows you, and just talk you through what you're seeing on the screen here on this graph, is we are looking at the solo performance of Luximo versus solo flufenicet. This is a data set here that is all from UK trials, okay? So it's all UK blackgrass trials where we applied both of these products pre-emergence of the blackgrass over these last 4 years. So we have a data set here that is over 100 trials. It's 106 trials. So what I would call a pretty robust data set. And then what you're seeing in terms of what we call panpipe chart, you're seeing the line, black line on 0, and then you're seeing all the blue bars that represent the delta difference between Luximo and flufenicet. And across all of these 106 trials, the mean percent control of the flufenicet was 56% control. This was sort of banging what we would expect to see from flufenicet. So it really did help validate this data set. And then what we were seeing with the Luximo was we were seeing a mean percent of 78% control from the Luximo. So straight away you were seeing here that we were getting 22 percentage points uplift from using Luximo versus flufenicet. And as you can see from this bar, we've got a vast number of the bars are above the black line, and you see them building to some of those points on the far right, where the difference between Luximo and flufenicet actually was very, very large. So across all these conditions, across the UK, across these 4 years, these are all over the country, dotted around different soil types, different blackgrass pressures, different locations across the different autumns that we have had these last 4 or 5 years as well. You can see the consistency of the performance of Luximo has been very, very strong, and we really do feel that it should be setting a benchmark for the baseline of grassweed programs going forward. Now, we've also took this data set and sort of broke it down to ask a different question from the data set as well. And that was looking at the different levels of blackgrass pressure from the trials. So what we did there, we took that same data set and then we broke it down to the heads per meter squared that we were being assessed in the trials at the final assessment, which happens sort of in end of May to early June. And you can see we broke that down into basic range boxes. You can see on the bottom there, so 0 to 50 blackgrass heads per meter squared, all the way up on the right to over 500 plus heads per meter squared. The Luximo, therefore, is represented in the blue line and the flufenicet on the grey line. And you can see quite clearly the two things. A, that the Luximo remains above the flufenicet. So, you know, that superior performance that we've always talked about. And you can see that that uplift in control as well remains regardless really of the blackgrass pressure. So this is not an active where you only get the benefit from using it on heavy blackgrass pressure situations. This is an active that you also get the benefit from superior control, reducing the numbers, reducing the seed return on lower levels of blackgrass pressure as well. So it really is an active for all situations for blackgrass control. But also one of our key messages is it's not just blackgrass. Luximo also is a very powerful active against Italian ryegrass, a sort of a growing threat in the UK. Surveys are sort of being done. It is being talked about more often and more frequently now. And a lot of people will tell you if you have bad ryegrass, those people would wish for bad blackgrass. Bad ryegrass really can be very, very severe. It is a highly vegetative and competitive weed. It produces a huge amount of seeds, and seed return can into the seed bank can very quickly get out of control. But Luximo also works very well against Italian ryegrass. And again, we were sort of doing this baseline comparison for Luximo versus flufenicet. And again, from the picture, you can clearly see on a side-by-side trial that Luximo was working very, very well as well. If we took this and put it into the panpipe chart like you've seen before, we don't have as many data points, that's fair enough to say, versus blackgrass, but we're still sort of now 17 trials across the last 5 years. And you can see here that the mean percent control from flufenicet over those 17 trials was 52%, so slightly down on the blackgrass. But the mean percent control from Luximo is actually 81%, so slightly up from the blackgrass, and that also means that the mean percentage uplift is also larger, so we're 29 percentage points larger. And again, you can see as you go from left to right on the bar, the vast majority of the bars are above the black line, so the vast majority of those sites, the Luximo is outperforming the flufenicet. And you do sort of see about sort of 2/3 along, you see a real step change where the level of Luximo performance really starts becoming quite large versus the flufenicet. So again, like for blackgrass, Luximo is a really, really important, valuable tool going forward for helping control ryegrass. Now, that is just sort of setting the scene in terms of the solo active, getting you an idea of where it sits in terms of its baseline performance versus the current standard flufenicet. As I said right at the start, we're not selling solo Luximo, we're selling Luxinem Plus in a pack with Stompaqua, which is pendimethalin. So how does that then look going forward when we look at combinations, commonly used combinations that might be sprayed pre-em in the field going forward from this autumn? So we've got here an example from Blackgrass trial from this last season, where we have the Luxinem Plus PDM and DFF tank mix compared to Liberator plus aclonophin tank mix, and you can see there a clear difference. The Luxinem Plus is clearly better performing in terms of the overall blackgrass control. We also have seen the same in ryegrass. This is a sort of an over-the-top drone shot looking at a ryegrass site. It's the same two treatments that we've got in there, and the fact that what you're seeing there with the Liberator clonophen box highlighted, that green is ryegrass in that plot, and why the Luxinem Plus box there is looking a lot paler is because the ryegrass was taken out and you just had the crop left in there. So in terms of sort of setting the scene in where it will fit in programs going forward, we're sort of looking at this in a way to try and help you understand what you might be doing right now in terms of your sort of pre-em blackgrass strategy, and where a Luxinem solution will fit in alongside of that. So we've got here a data set that's over a number of years. It's 21 trials in total and a multi-year looking at it, and a good level of untreated in those trials as well. So what we're looking at here then is we've got a sequence of Avadex granules applied pre-em, followed by pre-em, full rate crystal and DFF. So this is a very common type of start to grass weed control in the UK, and that level of control is represented by the grey line there. So this is what a lot of you have been using up to now. You're very comfortable with this type of approach, and you sort of understand what level of control that type of approach will give you in your field. So that's what that grey line represents. We know, and it's very well understood, that if you take the Avadex off, you get a lower performance. So what this is showing you here is the performance of just crystal plus DFF. If you add the Avadex onto that program, you get an uplift in performance going forward. So that's well known, well recognized in the market, that the Avadex gives you an uplift in control. So the key question therefore really is just looking at then the offer of Luxinem plus pendimethalin, where does that fit in terms of that grey line? Is it above? Is it below? Is it on par with the crystal plus DFF on its own? And the answer is it's very, very slightly above the line there. So just Luxinem plus PDM is giving you comparable control to a full pre-em program of Avadex, followed by crystal plus DFF. And if you sort of think about that and break that down, that is, basically a one-box solution giving you as good as control as the Avadex plus crystal plus DFF sequence. What we would also say in this point is, when you're looking at your buying decisions, you might want to price up those two options as well, because there'll probably be a difference in the price going forward on that as well. But it's a very, very powerful result that, Luxinem plus PDM gives you the same level of control as that grey line. Now, that is not to say there is no place for Avadex. You will still get an uplift if you use Avadex in sequence with Luxinem Plus. And that was quite clear. That's on the data set on there as well, that using Avadex in sequence, we got that uplift of control as well. So the trialate is still performing, it's still giving an uplift, and particularly if you've got those very bad situations, heavy pressure situations where you do need a bigger stack of chemistry to get on top of those issues, then there is certainly value in having the trialate in there as well. What we've also then done is had a look at the comparison of Luximo plus Pendi versus also another key competitor comparison in the market and current standard, and that would be looking at comparing Luximo plus pendimethalin plus DFF versus Liberator plus aclonophen when both are applied pre-M. So what we've got here is we have a data set that is 56 trials across the last 3 years. And in those 56 trials, you can see that the mean of the Luximo Plus solution came out at 84.2% control, and the mean of the Liberator plus aclonophen came out at 71.6% control. So what we were showing there is we're showing a mean uplift of 12.5 percentage points from those 56 sites. What we'll also say is actually that 12.5 percentage points uplift has been very consistent year on year. So we, regardless of the years and the conditions, we have got very good control. So again, you will see from that panpipe chart as you scan from left to right, the vast majority of the white bars there are above that white line, showing you that you really do get better control consistently, site by site, location, different populations, different soil types. You are getting better performance from Luximo plus solutions versus Liberator plus aclonophen. So that's really, if you like, a summary, quite a brief summary really of some performance sides of using Luximo. What I'd like to do now is I'll hand back to Steve, and he will go into some of the other sort of practical sides of using Luximo in the field. So over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Stu, and hopefully you are really starting to see why this is an exciting project. We're so used to, aren't we, just working on small improvements to optimize what we do on farm, and it's not very often that you get a true leap in performance over technology that is available now, but that is what we've got here with Luximo. We've got big jump up in performance, and I think we knew right through the development project that we had something very interesting, very exciting. But I think even for us, when we compared it to the very best products that are on the market now and used those in combination with Avadex as well, and all the cost that incurs in terms of product and 2 applications, to actually see with the Luximo plaque that we are getting even slightly better performance for that surprised us. So hopefully you can see this is a really exciting project. But a couple of housekeeping points just to finish up with. A couple of ideas that you need to have in the back of your mind, how to get the best performance from this new product. And firstly, I just want to take you to one trial. I think this is a fascinating trial actually, and we learned a lot about Luximo when this trial was done. Now, all 4 of these pictures were taken from the same trial, and you can see straight away quite a difference in the condition of the crop across those 4 pictures. On the left, we've got a picture of full label dose Luximo compared to full label dose flufenicet, and then the same on the left. But you can see that the 2 on the right, sorry, you can see that the 2 pictures on the left, actually the crop is suffering. And we've got some crop thinning there, regardless of whether you were using Luximo or whether you were using flufenicet, you can see a similar level of crop thinning. Yet on the right, the same chemistry sprayed on the same day, all pre-emergence, and you can see a really healthy crop in both of those pictures. So what was the difference? Well, it was down to the drilling, and these 2 sets of pictures were in different drill runs across the field. And actually on the left, what we have is a situation where the coulter did not get down to the required 30 millimeters of drilling depth. Whereas on the right, then the drilling depth was to 30 millimeters. It was no deeper than that. And it's very clear that we need to maintain that 3 centimeters drilling depth, whether we're using Luximo or whether we're using flufenicet. So the takeaway from this is, yes, you must drill to the required depth, but actually the issues, the rules in terms of drilling are the same for other residual herbicides. There is nothing new to learn in terms of crop safety with Luximo compared to products that you're using already. So just continue as you're going, use the same rules of engagement. Yes, watch out, keep an eye on the weather, avoid heavy rain after drilling, but you will get the best performance in terms of weed control when it is applied pre-emergence. So that is one critical point, but we do not expect to see any more risk of damage with Luximo than with other residual herbicides. I think the other point that is often comes up is the effect of soil residual material on the surface. And this is something we have looked into. We've had some specific trials done by NIAB to investigate this. I think the one thing NIAB clearly learned when they were doing this is probably not to offer to do such a trial again, because these are very, very complicated, very involved work to do. And you can see from the picture from the 2 colleagues in the field as they're setting the trial up, how they actually moved straw, wheat, both barley and wheat straw residue in to actually spread over the plots at differing levels to actually artificially create within one trial a range of different soil residual material coverage. And there's a number of things they learned there in terms of how does blackgrass emerge under different regimes of soil coverage. But what we're specifically interested in today is the effect on herbicides. On the screen now, you can see the Luximo plus PDM treatment compared to Crystal DFF. There were Liberator treatments in there as well, which performed to a very similar level to the Crystal treatment. And as you go from left to right, from the darker blue through to the paler blue, the level of straw was increased. So there was no straw in the dark blue, and then increasing levels of straw going through the mid blue to the pale blue. And for me, it's interesting that you've got very similar effects really for both herbicide regimes. But whatever the level of trash, you can see that the Luximo treatment is outperforming the best existing residual herbicide. For sure, if you increase your trash, you're going to reduce the amount of herbicide that hits the soil. And that's true for any herbicide, and that would include Luximo as well. But just look at the level of impact there. And actually the lowest control for the Luximo treatment is higher than the highest control for the Crystal treatment. So there will be an impact, but actually the strength of Luximo means that if you do feel you've got a high level of soil residual material, then actually Luximo is the most reliable product to use in that situation. And I think the final point here, because often we tend to see these situations in lower till situations, is that this is the one situation where we see a real advantage for Luximo. Because as I mentioned earlier, any seed, any blackgrass seed that is on the surface, if it is germinating, will be killed by Luximo. Luximo has a direct effect on that soil surface seed if it is germinating, as well as seed that is covered by seed soil as well. So if you're in this sort of lower till environment, provided you've got that 30 millimeters coverage of settled soil, then actually Luximo will give you the highest performance against blackgrass or ryegrass. So that is the final slide we wanted to show in terms of technical material. But just to bring one or two things together, there's a number of things you've seen this morning and a number of things that we'd like you to take away from this. But remember where we started. The first thing Stu talked about was IPM. There is nothing in Luximo to reduce your emphasis on IPM. There's nothing in Luximo that's going to lead you to forget what you've learned over the last decade or so about grassweed control. We still need to maintain our strategy of delaying drilling. We do not want to put this new herbicide under more pressure than we need to. We still need to think about crop rotation and using that tool to manage our grassweed products as well. But equally, we need to be using herbicides pre-emergence to get the best from them. I think we've learned that over the past 20 years, that if we do not get high levels of kill from our pre-emergence herbicide regime, we will never get the level of blackgrass control we need to achieve. So the key learning is go pre-em and always use the best herbicide. And the best herbicide is now Luximo. So that should be, in part of an IPM strategy, that should really be the basis of our blackgrass and our ryegrass control from now on. And we've shown you that Luximo is truly the best. We have shown you that a Luximo plus PDM pack is actually at least as good as the best products at the moment, even when they are combined with Avadex. So it's clearly the best product. Keep it on at full label dose and use it pre-emergence and follow exactly the same crop safety rules as you've been using with products up to now. And if you follow those relatively simple steps, you will get the benefit of Luximo. You will benefit from the fact that Luximo is a new mode of action in wheat. You will benefit from the fact that your grass weeds have never seen a herbicide of this mode of action before. And you will see on your own farm that Luximo is truly setting a new standard for blackgrass control. But even more than that, even more than just blackgrass control, we will also see exceptional control of ryegrass. And if we follow those steps, we will see these things. And at that point, I hope you will agree with us that Luximo is a new dawn for weed control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve and Stu. A lot of information to take in there, but hopefully everyone found that useful. Before we move on to the Q&A session, I just wanted to remind anyone that joined a bit later, if you would like basis on Aroso points, if you click on the Ask the Question and the Polls button, fill in your details and we'll claim those points for you. If you're watching this on catch up, the basis code is on the screen, which you can submit to basis. So on that note, I think let's bring back Steve and Stu, and we've got a lot of questions for you. So, and don't be shy, if anyone wants to add a few more, please feel free to do so. So, hi guys. A few of these questions came in before you got to that part in the presentation, but I think perhaps I'll ask them anyway, and if you can just do a quick recap, and if you want to add any further detail to that, just so we cover all bases, that would be great. So first of all, a bit of a topical question here in the current conditions. How effective is Luximo in the current very dry conditions, and crop safe is it when the inevitable rain arrives?
Steve, I know you covered crop safety, or do you want me to cover? I'll give my my 2 pennies worth.
Sure.
I mean, yes, it's a very topical question. We know that. I mean, actually, all fingers are crossed that we will get some rain and some nice moisture into the seed beds. Generally speaking, the overall general advice that we would have been given anyway does not change. If possible, really hold off from drilling until there is good moisture there for crops to grow. The IPM messages around, delayed drilling that we've mentioned before, and the benefits of that are still very, very strong and clear. But what we will say is we have found that Luximo will work better than flufenosec in certain drier conditions, but that is caveated around how dry those conditions are. We're talking about a normal sort of UK autumn. So the advice right now is hold fire and try and get some moisture into those seed beds, and for the crop to want to grow and chit, and then the weeds will want to germinate and chit, and then you will get herbicide uptake.
Thank you, Stu. Yeah, we had a couple of people ask about effectiveness in dry conditions, so I think you've covered that one. Just another a couple of application questions here. What droplet size, spray quality are you recommending in a pre-em program?
We're neutral on this, so we don't have a specific recommendation. We very much whatever is working for you, your farm, your logistics, your situation, getting round, getting sprayed. What we would say is there is a clear benefit of applying Luximo pre-em. So being able to get it on and applied pre-em will give you the best level of control. And if that means your water volumes are adjusted to allow you to be able to do that, if you have the ability to follow the drill with a sprayer so that you can get that pre-em on soon after drilling, within 48 hours of drilling, that's sort of what we would advise. So we don't have any specific, you must use this nozzle type or this water volume. It's what's been working for you on your farm with your pre-ems to date.
Great. Just to expand on that, just to cover all bases, another question here, are water volumes critical pre-em? Just if there's any, I don't know, caveat to that.
It's around coverage. You've got to get the herbicide onto the soil, and that herbicide wants to then, permeate very slightly down into the soil layer. So the better coverage that you get, the better layer, if you like, of herbicide that permeates into that soil that you get. So again, I think most growers, are aware of the pros and cons of different nozzle types, coarser nozzle droplets, increasing the water volume with those, or going with more standard nozzle types and water volumes. So it's really what practices people have been doing on their farm currently, what they know works for them.
Great, thanks, Stu. A couple of questions that have been voted upwards here, so we'll move on to those. So a performance question, how effective is Luximo against brome species or wild oats?
So nothing on wild oats at all. We have a much more limited data set, but we will show that it does show that there is contribution towards sterile brome control. The caveat is always around the germination pattern of the sterile brome versus the sort of activity window of the soil soil residual. But Luximo gives as good a level of control of sterile brome as other soil residuals. But we tend to also find you also need a programmed approach and a follow-up to get sufficient control of sterile bromes.
Okay, great, thank you. The performance question here. So have you any data in mix with prosulfocarb and as a comparison, particularly on ryegrass, given how effective prosulfocarb is?
When we get into sort of, these sort of nitty gritty questions on different tank mixes and sequences with Luximo plus Stumpacra, I think I'd first caveat and say get in touch with your local BASF agronomy manager, because they can sort of have a better one-to-one conversation with you on this area. We've tested multiple things with Luximo plus Stomp Aqua, as you would imagine. Prosulfocarb can work very well against ryegrass, but it's we've also found pendimethalin also very good contribution as well for ryegrass control. So it's a little bit of a mixing and matching. And as with any new active ingredient that you bring into the market, I think there's a period of people sort of finding their way with it a little bit and finding their balance as to what's the best tank mixes and sequences that work for them in their fields.
Great, thank you. And just shifting gears here a little bit, but it's been voted upwards, so I will ask what the public demand. With the shift in emphasis at BASF to Luximo Plus, what is the availability of Crystal this autumn?
It's fair to say that Crystal remains an important product for BASF, and it's got it will have uses that remain even with Luximo Plus being in the market. We do believe, of course, that Luximo Plus will take some of the Crystal business in that blackgrass, ryegrass sector, but Crystal remains in the market in significant volumes and will be available this autumn. But thinking about just combining it with another question as well, where the question there was whether we've done any trials with Luximo with flufenicet added in with it. I mean, a bit like the prosulfocarb question that Stu answered just now, we have done that as well. And we do, as you put any additional herbicide in, you can see a small incremental increase in blackgrass control. But our view, I would say, at least in the launch period of Luximo, is use the Luximo as it is recommended, maybe with Avidex, maybe without Avidex, and hold other products to consider whether you need to do a follow-up in the most difficult situations rather than adding them in pre-emergence. So Crystal will remain, but we do see it more, if people want to use it with Luximo, more as a sequence rather than a tank mix.
Great, thank you, Steve. Another market-related question here, which is top of the pack. Is the price of Luximo Plus going to remain secret much longer?
You should be able to get a price for Luximo Plus from your local distributor now, and if that's not the case, then please contact your agronomy manager. We'll be able to point you in the right direction.
Thanks. Okay, another performance question. What broadleaf weeds does Luximo control?
So Luximo itself, or Luximo Plus, will have poppy on the label as full control that you will achieve with Luximo Plus. But then also when in the combination with pendimethalin, you'll bring in all the weeds that pendimethalin will control as well from a broadleaf weed point of view. So that pack actually has got quite a broad broadleaf weed coverage when you look at the combined AIs together. Okay.
So speaking of pendimethalin, related question here, what is your recommendation for use if you have EM resistance to pendimethalin?
Our recommendation for use would be exactly the same, because even with if we have enhanced metabolism resistance to pendimethalin, that does not mean that the pendimethalin will not be giving you a strong contribution for blackgrass control. Enhanced metabolism kicks in more as we go later, as the blackgrass gets larger. And actually, when used pre-emergence, as we are recommending here, we would still expect good performance from pendimethalin even in those situations. So no change.
Thanks. Okay, just thinking back to the panpipe charts that you showed, Stu. Question here, what happened in the poorer results?
Well, I would say actually they're not poorer results. Actually, what was happening there was the flufenicet was performing very well. So that's why the difference, you know, got much smaller, or where the differences did sort of flip the other way around. But actually, if you generally looked at the scale, more or less really when the flufenicet outperformed, it was at a very low level, so quite on par with the Luximo. but the sheer weight of the results on the right-hand side of those pan pipes was showing you that the consistency was Luximo was outperforming flufenicet time and time again.
So speaking of flufenicet, have you any comparisons with 360 grams of flufenicet?
We probably have somewhere, yes. We looked at all these things, and I would say, you know, the power of Luximo remains. I think I'm sort of going back to some NIAB data, you know, where John Cousins will have sort of shown the value of extra added on flufenicet, and it does sort of plateau out at sort of 360, 480. From that point of view, Luximo is clearly outperforming flufenicet at 240. It will outperform flufenicet probably at 360 as well. But, you know, we're using it with pendimethalin. We're mixing the modes of action to get multiple modes of action hitting that blackgrass. And I think that's one of the key things that the value of bringing a new mode of action into the market is that you can now mix up your approach. You're not relying on just that one group of chemistry that Steve showed to sort of get that level of control. With Luxinem Plus now, with its new mode of action, you can really hit the weeds in a different way. So it's important to sort of have these mixed modes of actions in your grassweed strategy.
So on that note, a related question, have you any trials of Luximo pendimethalin with flufenicet added in pre-M?
Yes, I mean, we have trials, but as Steve said, you know, we're clearly showing that our recommendation of Luxinem Plus Stomp Aqua is a very, very robust recommendation. And as I think Steve said, you know, get to use it, get to understand it, and then if you feel that you need to sort of come in and follow up with other products in an early post-stem, then you've got the options there with flufenicet-based products as well to come in and keep that residual performance going. But you know, we've shown you on a couple of graphs yet there the power that Luxinem Plus Stomp Aqua will bring, and it really does sort of very high level of performance. So have confidence that that's doing a very good job.
Just, I guess, to expand on that a little further, a question here that says, data shows that increasing number of AIs at pre-M increases control. Shouldn't we be stacking at pre-M rather than relying on Luximo and pendimethalin? Just if you wanted to, yeah, respond to that directly also.
Sorry, Stuart. I think we've shown data, haven't we, to show that the uplift with Avadex with Luxinem plus pendimethalin actually is the same percentage uplift as it is when it's applied with Crystal plus DFF. So we are not suggesting that there isn't a role for using additional herbicides pre-emergence with Luximo. Having said that, what we are achieving with the pack that we're marketing this year is performance that's already equal to quite a significant stack used pre-emergence. So it's a change of emphasis, and some people will have blackgrass where they just feel they still want to use Avadex with it, in which case that is fully part of our recommendation. But we can achieve with one application, just with the products that come in the box, the performance that's available from the stacks that have done pre-emergence now.
Great. Just you mentioned Avadex there. Just a question related to Avadex factor. Can we tank mix Avadex factor with Luximo? Yeah,
yes, you can, with all the usual caveats of looking at both labels and so on. But yes, you can.
Thanks. Just a quick couple of crop related questions here. So one, is Luximo likely to be approved to be used on winter barley in the future? And two, will winter rye be on the label?
So no, it's winter wheat only on the label, and there's no view in the immediate future for winter barley. We are we continue to evaluate cereal crops, but at the moment, as it stands, the UK label will be winter wheat.
Okay. cheeky question here. Will you help me with roguing if Luximo Plus doesn't perform as well as current farm standard of Liberator and Proclus on difficult blackgrass?
I don't think you want me walking through your crops. Yeah, I think they're far more skilled people to do that job than me.
Great. Okay. Just a couple more application related questions here. Now you did touch on this, Steve, and this question came in before you covered it, but maybe just to recap. So as simethylene is a soil-borne residual, will its performance be limited or reduced in min-till situations with high levels of trash or organic material?
If there are very high levels of trash, very high levels of organic material, then the percentage crop control will be slightly lower than if there had been no trash there. But that is in line with the reduction you'll see with other herbicides. And as we saw earlier, that performance in the very, very high levels of trash that NIAB tested was still higher than the existing products in a non-trash situation. So it will have an impact, but nothing like it will still be the best product to be used. I think the other point worth making is that the pendimethalin component in the pack, the Stomp Aqua, that actually is the pendimethalin which is least affected by soil trash as well. So that will be a benefit for the Stomp Aqua in this offer.
I think this question has previously been touched on, but it's been voted upwards, so I'm just going to ask again. How crop safe is the product following high levels of rainfall after application?
That would be a situation where we would, along with all other cereal residual herbicides, say to avoid use where heavy rain is predicted. And Luximo is no different to any other product in that situation.
Okay, thanks. So a drilling date question here. Why the drilling date limit for pre-em Luximo? Crop effects, weather, and can you use it pre-em after the 15th of November?
So that is not a legal thing. That is our recommendation. Our view is that when you get to the 15th of November, there is no such thing when you're drilling of a good seed bed or a seed bed which is not already quite wet. And our belief is that once we get to 15th November, then actually the risk of crop damage increases, because the chances are your soil is already wet after when you've drilled, even before any rain occurs. So our advice really and our guidance in that situation is just to wait post-emergence, just wait for the crop to be pricking through, and at that point go. And actually that is sensible advice for any residual herbicide.
Okay. Conscious that we are over time here, we've got a few more questions on the app. I would say if anyone else has more questions they want to add, please put your name when you submit the question and we can get back to you individually on that. But I'll just quickly run through some of these final ones. So this one's been voted upwards. Have you looked at the effect of Luximo on the soil biome, i.e. nematodes, microorganisms, and are there any deleterious effects?
So Luximo, of course, has gone through the full regulatory process, and as part of this process there are certain aspects of soil health that need to be looked at, which has been done with detailed study. Those studies have been submitted to CRD, who reviewed the work, and they have passed this product as being safe to use in accordance with the label. So in that respect, yes, it has passed all the hurdles it needs to pass. And I guess as one final point of that, it's just ask the same question of everything else you're using. Are other products you're using on your farm that have not been through a regulatory process, have they had those same tests that's been done with Luximo and other crop protection products which have been tested to the highest standards?
Okay. I suppose a related question here, what is the half-life of Luximo?
So the half-life of Luximo is very, very similar to flufenicet. So broadly speaking, in that same sort of range. It's anything from sort of 20, 30 days to 60 days. It does depend on the temperature and the soil conditions, but you're getting very similar level of half-life to you will from flufenicet.
Okay. Have you tried different water qualities with Luximo Plus, mains, tap, water conditioned?
Yes, we have. We have very quickly looked into that, and it's not affected in the way that, say, a glyphosate might be affected by different water hardness. It's not affected in the same way as that. So there's no impact there.
Okay, final two questions here for you. First is just a very short recap one. What is the minimum soil cover for seed prior to application? And then secondly, have you trialled the use of picolinophen alongside Luximo and pendimethalin versus DFF?
So I'll take the soil cover one, which is 30 millimeters or 3 centimeters.
The picolinophen one, yes, picolinophen and pendimethalin, they're both two BASF in-house active ingredients. So yes, we have trialled them. Certain offers available in the marketplace will be around picolinophen, pendimethalin offers alongside Luximo Plus as well.
Excellent. Okay, I think we best draw that to a close. Thank you so much for all your questions. Great engagement, and thank you to Steve and Stu for answering them. Thank you very much.